this conference. And we'll start today's conference with the research, on the residential micro-units. Everyone knows that these are problematic areas, so to say. However, for us to define further steps, we must base ourselves on research, on thorough research, in order for us to be able to answer the question what to do and what should the residential micro-units of Riga look like. We need the research. And this is the first time in the history of Latvia when the professionals of various sectors have come together to talk about the problems or the aspects of residential micro-units. However, before we go over to the first session and its presenters, I would like to remember together with you, our colleagues who years ago started working on this area, and Gunnars Melbergs, Jānis Rubīns, Evalds Fogels, Ināra Marana, Modrīta Lūse, most probably are those who should be invited to this conference, who would contribute constructively to the debate. On basis of their research, we are able to talk about the topic today. So in this research session, as you can see from the agenda, we have 5 presenters coming from different backgrounds. And we decided to begin today's session with Agnese Sofija Kusmane and her presentation, focusing on the Soviet approach of organizing life in residential micro-units. So the presentation is about the life in the residential micro-units, the urban design from 1945 to 1985. And Madam Kusmane is a professional. Her background is in various areas. She's best fit to conduct research in this topic. She is the Master of Arts. She is landscape designer and has a master degree in...
I have to talk English because my presentation is, and I'm writing in English language, so I hope that my Latvian colleagues wouldn't mind. So please use earphones if you don't understand anything. I hope I am going to talk slow enough. Welcome to my presentation regarding everyday life in the new residential areas. However, I have to say I'm not going to talk about the everyday life how it was in the Soviet Union. I'm going to talk about the possibilities of everyday life in these residential areas in the contemporary period. And this is part of my doctoral thesis. And that's why I'm kindly asking not to make any quotes yet, because it's work in progress, and so it wouldn't be nice if some mistakes would appear under my name, so to say. Yes, so the field I'm dwelling on is environmental psychology and evolutionary aesthetics. I have chosen those fields because, to my opinion, it sheds a new perspective on the spatial aesthetics. And in my doctoral thesis, I'm also using urban sociology to contrast the findings with of the fields of environmental psychology and in evolutionary aesthetics, but I'm not going to talk about it today. I believe some other people actually are. And so evolutionary aesthetics and environmental psychology is dealing with human evolutionary past, and everything what it explains has to do with our history hundreds of thousands of years ago. And of course it has to do also something with Darwinism, and so I'm saying this so that you can kind of imagine what these theories are about. And so my research questions for this presentation are: do residential areas in Riga actually possess any specific spatial aesthetics? Because well, research normally just criticizes the modernism and all the faults it has made, and treats residential areas as more or less, aesthetically as more or less one residential area. And if these areas have some specifics, how does that influence the everyday life or the possibilities of everyday life in these residential areas? So, for my doctoral thesis, I have 4 case studies: Āgenskalna Priedis, Ķengaraks 1, Zolitude un Lielilpas iela, but I can't talk about all of these today, but if someone is interested, I can kindly explain. And now we are moving to the theoretical part of this presentation and also of my doctoral thesis, and I'm gonna stick with this slide a little bit longer because it kind of explains the basic premises I'm dwelling upon. So, evolutionary aesthetics can explain many things, like objects of design or art or whatever, but it also deals with built environment and with natural environment. And one of the sub-theories, or main sub-theories in evolutionary aesthetics and environmental psychology, claims that people, we humans, like spaces, natural, both natural or built, that possess both prospect and refuge. Prospect is a possibility to see into the landscape, and refuge is possibility to hide oneself into the landscape. So now I have to use this one. So, prospects can be straight, and refuges can be primary. And prospects and refuges can be blended or curved, and refuges can be secondary. So the difference is if the prospect shows you very far into the landscape, it's straight, but if it is kind of curving, it is secondary. Prospect. Evolutionary aesthetics and environmental psychology are dealing with four types of spaces, and open, undefined spaces, spacious, well-structured spaces, enclosed scenes, and blocked views. And all of them have different characteristics according to the components of prospect and refuge. So open undefined scenes have lots of open primary prospects. Enclosed scenes have only straight prospects. Blocked views have only primary refuge. And spacious well-structured scenes, which we can see here, have both secondary prospects and secondary refuges. So now I have to explain these stars on the images. As you see on this picture, open undefined scenes have blank stars, which means that lay people, not experts, but lay people who actually live in these areas, or just any other ordinary people, so to say, do dislike this kind of landscapes or built environments. Enclosed scenes and blocked views are marked with 1 star, which means that lay people, to a certain extent, dislike these spaces, but still it's somehow bearable. The most liked ones are spacious well-structured scenes, and these are also the scenes that, according to evolutionary aesthetics, would be the most proper ones for vivid everyday life, since our attention and our emotional resources can be recharged in that kind of environment. People tend to stay in these spaces and gather there and do their everyday routines. So I have to torture you a little bit more with these with parameters because you can easily imagine that any spacious, well-structured scene minimized to very, very small box size of environment would also feel uncomfortable. This is why evolutionary aesthetics and environmental psychology, the scientists working with methods that are borrowed from natural sciences, have measured that what makes open undefined, how large is actually open undefined scene, how large, meaning, so, how wide, what is the length and what is the height of this scene. The same goes for spacious, well-structured scenes, enclosed scenes, and blocked views. Mystery, this is how, it's a term that is used, even though it sounds very esoteric. However, mystery, which in other words is secondary refuge and secondary prospect, which means if the prospect is blended, then it becomes mysterious, is evaluated with additional points, because if there is some potential in the scene, as they say, if going behind the corner, we probably would gain more information which we cannot see at the moment. It gives additional points to the scene. So I have compiled this kind of a table from very many different academic articles. It's mainly Stamps and Hartig and some others. So this table as such does not yet exist. It is not published. It has to be proven, which is one of the aims of my doctoral thesis. So I have compiled lots of different bits of pieces into this table, and I hope it somehow it works. So and then also what is important to say is that regarding modernist residential areas, these two types of spaces are the ones that we see the most often, and enclosed scenes and blocked views we exist to a much more lesser extent. That's why we can maybe concentrate on those two. Yes. So what I am doing, what kind of method I'm using, I am, on the example of Agnese and Friedis now, I am picking up one residential area, picking up one exit from the hallway, and drawing an imaginary line to the bus station, and I'm dividing this destination in 5 equal pieces. And at each stop, I'm taking a picture, a photo, so to say, and I'm claiming that vision field is 120 degrees. So one can discuss what is the angle of our view, but I'm claiming that this is our vision field. And then I am analyzing basically photos. I'm also using, of course, Google Maps to help me to see if there are any differences. But just at the first sight, you probably can see that there is a quite large difference in spatial aesthetics in Agenskalna Priedis and, for example, Zolitude, which is another case study. So every case study actually represents one decade, 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s. And now I'm going to go to one sample, kind of zoom in how exactly it happens, how exactly I measure these, and how exactly I relate scenes to different types. So as I said, I'm drawing this line and attaching 5 points on regular distances. So if someone is interested, I'm actually also comparing different layout plans, because as we all know, most of them, actually except Agenskalna Priedis, but most of the residential areas had gone through a few stages. They have been planned and replanned. Sometimes it took 10 years. So I am actually also giving historical perspective to these, to avoiding these categories. So this is, for example, Agenskalna Priedis, as I said, had only one version, or at least I have never found any other version. And yeah, the plan maybe is not so. So this is the entrance, and this is the bus stop. And at the moment, I am here on this yellow dot, and which corresponds to this very picture. So the scene is comprised of widths of 50 meters. The length of the scene is 70 meters. And the heights of the buildings are 16 meters. So I am already seeing that this scene is probably it belongs to spacious, well-structured category. Then what I have to do, I have to also count and analyze what kind of prospects and what kind of refuges this scene has. And because of its blended prospect, I'm saying that there is a certain degree of mystery, again, in this scene. And I'm also counting secondary refuges, and secondary refuges are the refuges that are somewhat in the distance. And I'm counting 6 of them and adding points. And the result of this simple calculation is that this particular scene, where I'm standing now, gets 19 points out of 21 possible. So if I calculate all the 5 stations together, then I have 83 points out of 105 possible points, which means that people that vivid everyday life would be possible with minor urban design or landscape design changes. Yes, and the same is done also with the same is done also with Zolitude. But Zolitude has received only 12 out of 105 points under the same methodology, which makes things that if we want to get people to use these spaces in everyday life, we have to do major changes. And 2 points restriction of this methodology is, of course, that it's environmentally deterministic. But in my doctoral thesis, that's why I'm using urban sociology. And of course, this analysis does not inform you about how the zones are used, which is also could be also a big have big influence on the everyday life. So I'll stop here. Thank you.